Connie. I'll call the August 12th, 2008 meeting of the Newport Beach City Council to order. Can we have the roll call, please?
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Do we have a closed session report from the city attorney?
There's nothing to report.
Okay. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Rosansky, followed by the invocation by Reverend Dr. Dennis Short from Harbor Christian Church and President of the Newport Mesa Irvine Interfaith Council.
Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in prayer. Loving Creator God, we who live in Newport Beach are blessed by the leadership of this council and the staff that assists them and us. May they continue to do their jobs diligently with the welfare of all who live and work here on their minds. We're fortunate to live near the ocean and Newport Bay. May we be reminded of those words of Jesus when he said, "To whom much is given, much shall be required." I lift up all the Olympians from all the countries. May their witness of camaraderie be an inspiration to us all. I lift up all who live in armed conflict around the world and pray for peace and understanding. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. First item on our agenda this evening is presentations, and it's my pleasure and honor, actually, to make a presentation of plaques to our outgoing board and commission members. These are residents of our city who have given countless hours of their time over the years, many of them up to 8 years of their time, serving the city in various capacities in our boards and commissions. I've had the pleasure of sitting on interview boards for a number of years for the people applying to these positions, and we're so fortunate in this city to have such a high level of interest and high level of quality and expertise amongst the folks that apply to be on our boards and commissions. And so it really is an honor this evening to make this presentation of these plaques to honors these individuals for their service to our city over previous years. We have 6 that we're going to hand out this evening, and I'm going to call your name, and if you would come down to by the table here, I'll come down and hand you your plaques when the after I read all the names, and then if you wish to make some remarks to the council, feel free to step forward to the podium. We're also going to take a picture of everyone. So the first plaque goes to Byron Bill Williams for the Board of Library Trustees. Second is Arlene Cartosian for the City Arts Commission. Paula Godfrey for the Civil Service Board. Deborah Allen for the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission. And Jeffrey Cole for the Planning Commission. Did I miss somebody? Oh, Doug Woods, Civil Service Board. Doug, I knew there was one missing up there.
Well, after 10 years of service, I guess I'm entitled to a minute or two. I just want to thank the council today and, of course, former councils. It seems that 10 years ago it's been a long decade, but a wonderful decade. And at the time, it was Denny O'Neill who was the mayor, and Todd Widgeray had actually just been nominated and inducted into the council that year. But I just want to thank you for all your support. As most of you know, the City Arts Commission has really come a long way, not just art exhibits, but wonderful concerts in the park, opera, and Shakespeare by the Sea. And I do have something in return to give to all of you who have served. This is inspiration that came out of the Centennial book, and it's a first edition of some of my watercolors. So Mayor Selich, This is for you, and for the other council people, I'll just give you to you. You can pass them out. There's also something for homework and sharing. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this honor. I appreciate it. During my 16 years serving as Civil Service Commissioner, I have worked with at least 14 different council members, several city managers, 3 police chiefs, 2 fire chiefs, and numerous wonderful city staff. I shall miss my city family very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It has been a great honor. Since I was on the PB&R Commission, we opened 3 new parks, Bonita Canyon, Arroyo, and Back Bay View Park. Our staff is currently working very, very hard to make the latter park one we can also be proud of aesthetically, as well as the beautiful views from the park. And probably my greatest endeavor, if you will, that I think turned out to be a success was the modifications we recommended to you and you ultimately passed to Council Policy G1, the tree trimming policy, which deals with a balance of the views in the terrace communities with the city's love of trees in the non-view areas. It's been a wonderful commission. I would welcome anybody who wants to see a great commission work to stop by the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission at any given meeting. It's a wonderful commission with greatly dedicated people. And we work hard, but we don't work anywhere near as hard as you do. And we thank you very much for all of your volunteerism as well. Thank you.
Briefly, it's really been an honor and a pleasure to serve on the Planning Commission for 5 years. And the one area that I'm most proud of is the work we did on the general plan updates, and with some of the people I've sat with here on the council, with Leslie and Michael particularly, and Ed. So it's really been great. I really want to thank the staff as well. It's been a great pleasure for the 5 years. The support and really the quality of people here is really to be noted. The whole planning director, Sharon, and all your help, and Robin, has been great, and really appreciated all of the help along the way. Thank you very much.
It's been a nice ride. Thanks.
I think I got into this library board by just circumstances that I didn't expect, but I offered Elizabeth Starr a gift for her birthday, and she said she'd like to have it go to the Newport Beach Library. And I said, great. And so we got over there and got the wireless program going at the library. And for 4 years, I think I worked in one of the best library systems in the country. And I hate to go, but somebody else needs to get in there and work even harder than I did. Thanks for the opportunity.
again, thank you all very much, and Paula Godfrey, 16 years. Boy, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Okay, our next presentation is International Literacy Day Proclamation. Come forward. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. This is a proclamation of the City of Newport Beach. Whereas the need for a highly literate citizenry is necessary as Newport Beach moves towards an increasingly challenging future, and approximately 10% of the residents of Newport Beach and many of the adults employed by businesses with the city are lacking the literacy skills necessary to meet these challenges, and lack of literacy skills impacts not only their lives and the lives of their families, but their ability to work productively and their full participation as citizens, residents, and employees of our city. And the Newport Beach Public Library Literary Services works with adults seeking to improve their literacy skills to enable them to achieve success in their lives at home, at work, and in the community. And the Newport Beach Public Library Literacy Services hosts an annual International Literacy Day event to highlight the importance of literacy in society and the great strides that program participants have made. Now, therefore, I, Edward Selich, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, do hereby proclaim September 4th, 2008 as Literacy Day in the City of Newport Beach, and urge my fellow citizens to learn more about the importance of literacy and become involved with literacy in the community. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the city seal of the City of Newport Beach to be affixed this 12th day of August, 2008.
My name is Terri Buckley. I am a volunteer in the literacy program as a tutor. And on behalf of all of the staff, volunteers, and learners within the program, I want to thank you for acknowledging the work that is done by so many within the city. And I'd also like to invite each and every one of you to the International Literacy Day festivities on September 4. I know Councilmember Don Webb has joined us in the past, and I think he found it both interesting and enjoyable. Further, each of you, probably every day of your lives, encounters someone who is in need of help in reading, comprehending, or understanding English. You would be doing literacy in Newport Beach, the United States, and the world a great favor by referring them to us. And we would certainly appreciate your doing this for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our final presentation this evening is to the Conference and Visitors Bureau. It's the Conference and Visitors Bureau Industry Accreditation from Destination Marketing Accreditation Program. Whereas the Newport Beach Conference and Visitors Bureau serves as the destination marketing organization for the community, and the Conference and Visitors Bureau is a well-organized, well-managed, and well-directed organization that is served by a highly trained, dedicated, and enthusiastic staff. And in October 2007, the Conference and Visitors Bureau, under the leadership of President and CEO Gary Sherwin, embarked to attain the Best Practices International Destination Certification by successfully completing the Destination Marketing Accreditation Program offered by the Destination Marketing Association International. And in July, the City Council received notification that the Conference and Visitors Bureau has successfully completed the comprehensive application process, whereby the Bureau had to provide evidence of compliance with 54 mandatory standards and 33 voluntary standards. And in obtaining this accreditation, the Newport Beach Conference and Visitors Bureau becomes the first West Coast and only destination marketing organization to achieve this prestigious accreditation, joining such cities as Las Vegas, Orlando, and Miami, and the Destination Marketing Accreditation Program certification is reflective of the Bureau's commitment to professional expertise and training to make our Conference and Visitors Bureau as strong as it can be. Now, therefore, I, Edward Selich, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, do hereby commend the Newport Beach Conference and Visitors Bureau for its successful efforts to achieve the global credential, and I call upon all Newport Beach residents to join me in offering my congratulations to the Newport Beach Conference and Visitors Bureau for this elite distinction. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the city seal of the City of Newport Beach to be affixed this 12th day of August, 2008. Gary, Andrew?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Sharon and Homer, I want to thank you on behalf of our organization for this wonderful, wonderful honor. And while you were very kind enough to kind of single me out in this proclamation, I want to make it very clear that the convention, or the Conference and Visitors Bureau, is really a truly team effort from its board to its staff, and we're very fortunate to have a couple of people here who are really instrumental in making this accreditation process happen, including our chairman of the board, Andy Theodoro, who just completed his second term as our chairman, and thanks to Andy's leadership, he really pushed us as a staff to go after this and to encourage us, because he knew that we established standards of excellence. It really is what Newport Beach needs, because Newport Beach is a first-class community and it deserves a first-class marketing effort. We also had David Muller, who's on our board and newly appointed to our executive committee. And then a couple staff people I'd also like to recognize who are part of our leadership team. Maureen Barrett, our Vice President of Marketing. Tim Ellsworth, our Vice President of Sales. And lastly, Loretta Walker, who's our Director of Administration. And Loretta put together this very thick binder, and this is the accreditation program, so you can see it in kind of its tangible form. As you saw, there were a number of very specific areas that we had to submit compliance on. It included everything from governance, human resources, our sales, our marketing efforts. And to tell you the reason we really wanted to do this, and I'm being absolutely sincere, is we wanted to do it really for all of you, because we know many of you say, well, the CVB guys are all very nice. They're all very pleasant. They throw a nice dinner once a year. But are they really any good? Are they doing what they need to do? And our international association developed this accreditation a few years ago to address the needs of many public agencies to say, you know what, if your agency is going to be willing to go through a process like this, know that after they've been vetted, they've established a track record of hopefully best practices. And that's really what we wanted to kind of demonstrate to you. We're honored that we've become the first and so far the only CVB on the West Coast. There are about 1,400 CVBs in the United States. Only 58 of them now are accredited. It is a laborious process, as you can see, and it took us about 8 months to go through it. But I think at the end, we're certainly a better organization for doing it, and hopefully it reflects our commitment to doing the very best work on your behalf, because we certainly value the partnership we have with the City of Newport Beach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks a lot, and congratulations for all your hard work with the Visitor and Conference and Visitors Bureau. Madam Clerk.
Notice to the public. The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones and pagers off or set them in the silent mode. Now is the time for City Council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Councilwoman Gardner?
City Manager, do we have an ETA on the proposed styrofoam ordinance?
Study session in September, I think the first meeting we were planning on.
Okay, good. I also have an announcement. There's an email that was circulating in our area about an incident that sounded quite dramatic. It was allegedly involving a group home with a number of people proned out, I understand is the term, guns drawn, and it sounded like something out of a television series, really, but very alarming to hear. And following up with the police department, none of that happened. It did happen on a street that does have a group home, apparently, but that was the only connection. They were following a car that was from a rental car agency in Arizona. It was way overdue. They found the vacant car. The driver turned up finally. He surrendered. There were no guns. He was not proned out. So much ado about not very much, just so we don't have any more rumors of that sort lying around.
Councilman Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier this week, staff has informed me that our Marines Memorial was the victim of apparent vandalism. And obviously, this is a cowardly desecration that is outrageous and outraging to every person in our community, irrespective of their political views on the war or of anything else. Not only is it an affront to the Marines, but also to the community itself. So I'd like to ask staff to come back with a strategy for monitoring and protecting this and our other public art, and also a strategy to either find the vandals or protect against further vandalism in the future.
Councilman Webb?
None, please.
Councilman Henn?
Two things. I have my own vacation siren warning story I thought that I would relate. I was at Wrigley Field in Chicago the night the worst set of thunderstorms in the history of the city came through. And fortunately, because the sirens went off, we were able to go down below the stands and ride it out. Riding it out included 3 tornadoes and over 90,000 lightning strikes that hit the ground in a period of about 4 hours, which is about as many lightning strikes as Chicago gets in 6 months. And so I appreciated having that warning system and that siren go off. Not a single person was killed as a result of all those storms.
Did the Cubs win?
The Cubs lost.
Oh, bummer.
But it was a rain-shortened loss, and so they did win the next 2 games in the series.
Oh, there you
go. Secondly, I would like to, on behalf of me and my family and all the residents of the First District of Newport Beach and the citizens of Newport Beach, extend a really huge vote of thanks to our police department for what I think is some of the finest police work we've seen in perhaps some time, at least that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's a lot of wonderful police work that goes on that we don't become aware of. I'm referring to this incident where there was a gang fight at Blackie's by the Sea on the peninsula a couple Sundays ago. And due to the very proactive work on the part of our police department and the detectives, there was a sweep that was organized, included 150 officers from several jurisdictions around Southern California here, wherein I think probably around a dozen of the participants in that gang fight were arrested, and then in the homes and other locations, dozens and dozens of weapons were confiscated. Some of those folks are in jail already, and I think they're still looking for some others. The investigation is continuing. I am so appreciative of the fact that, despite the fact that this can happen in any community, our police department sent a loud and clear message that those kinds of folks are not welcome here in Newport Beach, and hopefully quite a few of them won't be going to any city in California or anywhere else for a number of years as a result of all of this. And so fabulous, fabulous work on the part of our police department, and my thanks.
Councilman Rosansky?
Nothing, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Daigle?
None, thank you.
I have one announcement. The city has embarked on doing parking management study for impacted areas of Newport Beach. And on Wednesday, August the 27th, it's Balboa Island's turn. There's going to be a kickoff meeting at 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. in the evening. It's going to be at the Beach Center at 115 Agate Avenue. And we're inviting all Balboa Island residents and business owners to attend. The meeting's going to be in two parts. The first is going to be an opportunity to provide the consultants with local perspectives on the parking situation on Balboa Island and what your concerns and what your goals are for parking planning on Balboa Island. And then the second part of it's a presentation on it's called Parking 101, and it's an introduction to ways to thinking about parking planning and develop a common vocabulary for use during the study process. So this is an important meeting for people on Balboa Island, residents and business members, and I'd also ask the staff to publicize this as much as possible because I don't think we've got a lot of advance notice out on it, so I'd like to see if we can get as many people from Balboa Island there as possible. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, before you go to the clerk, I think this would be a good time to make an announcement that we are not going to have a second council meeting this month, that the council will be going dark, so those people who are looking for an agenda will not be able to find one.
Okay, sounds like we just made that announcement.
I think so.
Madam Clerk.
Consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 10, are considered by council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The city council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion unless members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor, state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Councilman Henn.
I have nothing.
Councilman Rosansky.
Sorry, nothing to pull, but I would like to register an abstention on item number 3.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Daigle.
None.
Councilman Gardner.
Nothing.
Councilman Curry.
Nothing to pull. I will also be abstaining on item 3.
Okay. Councilman Webb.
Nothing.
And I have nothing. Does staff have anything to pull?
No items to pull or continue.
Okay. Does anyone from the public want to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay. Seeing no one, I'll bring it back for motion.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve items 1 to 10, and on item 3, we'll be registering an abstention for Councilmember Rosansky and Councilmember Kari.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Daigle. Motion carries.
Okay. Next item is oral reports from City Council on committee activities. Councilman Gardner.
Nothing.
Councilman Curry.
I just want to commend the Arts Commission for the Shakespeare by the Sea program that was put on. I know Councilmember Rosansky and I both had the opportunity to participate in those performances, and again, a great job to enhance the arts and culture in the community.
You participated?
I was in it. I said hi to everybody.
It sounds like you were on the stage.
I was Romeo, he was Juliet.
Councilman Webb. Councilman Henn.
Nothing.
Councilman Rosansky.
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Daigle.
None, thank you.
And I have none. Okay, the next part of our agenda is public hearings. First one is the public hearing on the fee resolution and master fee schedule. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask that we continue this item until our September meeting. There are, I think, some cleanup actions that need to take place that were not very well described in the staff report, and I think we can do a better job, so I'd like to come back at the next meeting with this.
Okay. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on this item? Okay. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
item to the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, please vote.
Motion carries.
Okay, our next public hearing is the Housing Element Update, General Plan Amendment Number 2008-0003. Sarah, staff report?
Yes, this will be provided by our consultants, PB&S&J. You know them as EIP when they worked on the general plan. And we have Linda Tatum and Jesse Barkley from that firm. And then if there are questions later, Senior Planner Greg Ramirez and I will probably be helping out with those.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Selich, council members. I'd like to present really briefly some of the summary of our work with your staff in preparation of the housing element. And we'll have a PowerPoint for this presentation. Essentially, the housing element is one of 7 required general plan elements that state law requires cities to complete as a component of the general plan. And it's generally in response to the statewide need for housing and the state's goal to have decent and suitable living environment for all residents of California. Essentially, the housing element is a policy document that sets forth a 7-year strategy for local governments to essentially provide a regional, their fair share of the Southern California region's housing need. It's a policy-oriented document. It's not an implementation program. And the primary objective of the housing element is to essentially for communities to provide the opportunity for housing production in their community. And they can do that through general plan land use designations that allow housing, as well as zoning that permits housing at appropriate densities. It's also unique in the sense that unlike all the other general plan elements, the housing element is the one that is required to be certified by the state of California. So upon completion of the document, it gets submitted to the state for certification. Essentially, when the housing element is submitted to HCD, that's the state Housing and Community Development Department, they review the housing element for its statutory compliance to determine how appropriately the element is actually achieving the goals of the state law. And localities then, upon receiving the comments from HCD on the preliminary housing element, they have the opportunity to respond to those comments or to address those comments. And that's the part of the process that we're currently in. We've received preliminary comments from HCD and have revised the element to respond to those comments. I'd like to briefly talk about some of the benefits or the reasons why it's important to get a housing element certified by the state. The first one is that if your housing element has been certified, it's deemed to be you're assumed to have a legally adequate general plan. And what that essentially means is that it allows the city to continue with its development approvals. Worst case scenario, if a housing element is not certified, technically the city's general plan is not in compliance with state law, and that could be a basis for not, it could be a basis for the city to not be able to approve development projects. The other benefit is that when you do have a housing element that's certified by state law, you have the presumption of validity for the entire general plan. And essentially what that means is that if someone chooses to litigate the housing element, the presumption is that it is valid and the burden of proof is on the potential litigant. And lastly, the other benefit of having a certified housing element is that the city receives priority for some state grants and grant funds for housing and infrastructure. Really briefly, the process that we've been through with this document in terms of working with city staff, we've had 3 community workshops. One of those was specifically targeted to housing service providers and housing developers. 2 of those were targeted to the general public. After conducting those public workshops, we did receive comments from the public, and we submitted the draft housing element to HCD for review and comment. We've also had the public hearing before Planning Commission. That was in June of this month, or a couple of months ago. We're now hearing the City Council presentation for the housing element tonight. Once we receive comments and feedback from City Council at tonight's hearing, the document will be submitted to HCD. And HCD takes approximately 60 to 90 days to review the draft housing element, and they will then provide further comments back to the city. At that time, it will come back to both Planning Commission and City Council for final adoption. And we will provide the detailed comments on what the HCD comments are and attempt to respond to those comments. And lastly, after final adoption of the housing element, it will then be presented back to HCD. As a part of that public hearing process that we've been through to date, we've received a number of comments from those public workshops that we had, those 3 community workshops, and also comments that came up from the Planning Commission public hearing. Those comments have resulted in some substantial revisions to the document. For example, we had a number of comments regarding some of the data that was in the document related to the homeless. That section of the discussion regarding homeless resources has been expanded. We've had some clarification of some of the city's historical housing production. That table H40 in the housing element has been expanded to accommodate the production of housing and permits issued in the community since the previous housing element. And lastly, we've provided very detailed responses to the council that we've received from the public and from the Planning Commission public hearing in Attachment 5 to your staff report. This table shows essentially what we call the RHNA, the city's regional housing needs allocation. The first column to your left that says 2008 through 2014, you'll notice there that the city's required housing production goals are a total of 1,784, and that's broken down into the various income categories that HCD requires the city's housing element to address. And in the subsequent columns to your right, you'll see, for comparison purposes, you'll see the city's 1998 through 2005 allocation, and that was a total of 475. We also included, again, for your information, the city's requirement from the prior RHNA for properties that were annexed into the city of Newport Beach. What we've done, I mentioned earlier that the city is required to provide the opportunity for housing development in the community within various income groups. This highlights some of the areas that were addressed in the city's general plan update, some of the areas where new opportunities for housing were provided through mixed use development, zoning, and general plan designations. And those range from the airport area where the general plan allows up to 2,200 units, Newport Center, Newport Mesa, Balboa Peninsula, Mariners Mile, and also Corona Del Mar, where there's some a limited number of vacant properties available for housing. So the total, as you can see here, ranges from 3,500 to 3,700. And again, ample opportunity for the city to provide its required RHNA allocation for potential housing development. Again, just to give you a historical perspective, the city has been fairly active in terms of actually producing and providing affordable housing in the community since 1984. Approximately 17% of the housing units that have actually been developed and regulated under the city have been affordable. And if you look at that number since 1997, the city has actually collected over $3 million in its in lieu housing fund, and that's a part of the city's inclusionary housing policy. And also from 1998 through 2005, that was a prior housing element cycle. 19% of the homes that were approved under the city's current regulations were affordable. And the current adopted general plan provides those opportunities for mixed use and housing development in those areas I mentioned earlier, Newport Center, Balboa, and West Newport Mesa. So again, there are ample opportunities for affordable housing within the community under the adopted general plan that's just reinforced in the housing element. In summary, several of the new housing programs that have been put into place with the adoption or are proposed for being adopted as a part of the comprehensive housing element is the city's inclusionary housing policy. That's a continuation of a current policy which essentially says that 15% of the housing production that occurs in the city will be geared for affordable housing. Also, continuation of the city's in lieu housing fund That fund is currently being updated, and will be coming back to the council later this year or at some point in the future. And of course, the revision of the city's density bonus program. That's a state requirement. That program is also being updated as a part of the city's comprehensive zoning code update program. And a couple of other programs that the city will continue to provide are expedited review of projects that do have an affordable housing component, as well as a potential waiver of development fees and expedited processing for affordable housing projects. And also a recent requirement for state law, it's called Senate Bill 2. It requires cities to provide zoning that accommodates homeless shelters and emergency shelters as a land use that is provided by right. And that also will be a part of the city's comprehensive zoning code update that will coming back to the city council.
On the expedited project review and that sort of thing, if we make affordable housing a requirement, which I think we do for everything, then everything gets expedited?
No, there's a discretionary. It would be subject to a discretionary process.
Okay.
Well, I think that would apply more if someone were doing a 100% affordable project such as Bayview Landing, and we did do expediting and waiver of fees for that project.
That concludes my comments. We're available to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
Excuse me, one clarification. In terms of the housing element having gone to HCD, it has not yet gone to HCD. It will go as a result of council's action tonight. It will be submitted to HCD for review.
Okay. I've just got one question that I was noticing the arena numbers that are there. What happens in, say, 10 to 15 years when our major development areas in the general plan are built out and we don't have anywhere to put 1,700 or 2,000 units? Are we going to be under some kind of mandate to amend our general plan to create more housing opportunities? Or, I mean, what happens when a city reaches a, quote, built-out condition, for lack of a better term?
Well, we sort of faced that when the last cycle housing element was at HCD for certification, because that was prior to the update of the general plan, and we were pretty close to build out of what the previous general plan allowed. And we kept making that argument to the staff at HCD, and the program that they were most excited about then that some other communities had adopted was converting outdated, underperforming strip commercial centers to housing. And I remember telling them, well, we don't have those either. But I think the message is that HCD probably doesn't ever consider a community built out because they think there are always opportunities for redevelopment and recycling of land, and it's the city's responsibility to find some sites.
Well, that'll be interesting discussion 10 to 15 years from now. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and maybe this is going to be dealt with a little bit later, but according to what we just saw, we've had a pretty good record on affordable housing with 17% over a period, and then, which is why I'm asking the question, I think I got a reaction there, and 19% in a shorter period. There seems to be, though, when we get comments from like the Kennedy Commission, a real question about that. Why is this such a, it seems to me this is something very easy to measure, and why is there such a divergence of opinion about whether we have done a good job or whether we have not at all supplied affordable housing?
I think it depends on which numbers you use, and in our responses to the comments from the Kennedy Commission that are attached to your report, we explain that in a fair amount of detail. I'm not finding the handwritten page. Thank you. And so we started with making sure that we were talking about net new units, not total number of housing unit permits issued, because sometimes one is replacing a unit that's been demolished. And then the other thing that we calculated differently than the Kennedy Commission did is we looked at the housing development that was done under the regulation of the city of Newport Beach. And a lot of our housing production during that time period was done in Newport Coast, and an affordable housing implementation program had been approved by the County of Orange prior to annexation, and so we had no control over how that was done. And a similar thing occurred with Bonita Canyon, where all of the development, including the AHIP, had been approved by the City of Irvine before we annexed. And so we deducted those units from our base and calculated that the ones that the City of Newport Beach had regulated and had made the affordable housing requirements on, this was our city's production level.
In other words, they are counting the population of Newport Coast and Bonita Canyon
Yeah.
in with Old Newport Beach for their numbers, and that's why there's the
Right,
discrepancy.
and including every permit issued, even if it was not for a new unit.
Didn't the City of Irvine and the County of Orange require affordable housing units when those were built?
They did, but at least in the case of Newport Coast, the requirement wasn't as high as it would have been under the City of Newport Beach.
Okay, but at least some
Yes,
affordable housing was built when those facilities were constructed, wasn't it? Or
For Newport Coast, I think some was built, and some existing units were used with affordability covenants put on them.
Okay.
And for Bonita Canyon, affordability terms were extended on some existing affordable units in the City of Irvine, and I think that was done with some bond financing.
Okay, so that when those were built, there was affordable housing
There was some.
That we did get within the county.
Correct.
That took care of those needs, and so that's another reason why it probably shouldn't be used against Newport.
True.
Mayor Pro Tem Daigle?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask some questions along the lines of how the market is providing affordable housing opportunities. And in looking at the various charts and the housing stock, it looked like, I think it's about 48% is rental, about 48% is owner-occupied, and you got 4% that's off the market. So I think it's pretty close to a 50-50 split on our housing stock.
Pretty close. I think the rental may be closer to 44%, but it's close.
Okay. Now, when you look at the median rent for a market rental, this would be market, what kind of a, I guess, ballpark, we'll have to be real precise, what kind of a number are we looking at?
Well, we have never done any surveys of rent, and I don't know that we could get a really good response on that, but just with a really quick website search of the major apartment complexes in the city, and I looked at two-bedroom units because we generally look at the standard of a family of four for our affordability. And so the median rent among those complexes is $2,559. And if we look at the current rent limits for a moderate income unit, if it were to be restricted, that rent limit would be $2,774.
Okay. So you could say then perhaps if 50% of your housing stock is rental and the median of that is below moderate, a restricted moderate by definition, then 25% of your rentals, 25% of your housing stock would be affordable, according to moderate.
Roughly. It's not a really precise calculation, but you could say that roughly. But we need to remember that is only affordable to moderate income, which is the highest income level among those considered lower. And we also need to remember that those units are not restricted to be at that rent and income level. So a household with any income level could move into them, and the property owners can increase the rent without any restriction whenever they found it appropriate.
Okay. So the market is providing a volume of affordable housing, though?
I think so.
Okay. And then my other question is, when looking at the potential development areas, who determines affordability standard? Is that set by coastal, or is that going to be set by the city? How does that work?
Those standards are set by state law. It's the Health and Safety Code. So it applies whether you're in or outside the coastal zone.
Okay. So coastal won't override that?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Gardner?
Yeah, I just had a question on the letter from Orange County Housing Providers. they urged us not to have an inclusionary zoning policy, yet we do have one. Is that correct? In terms of our affordable housing, we have...
Yes.
That we might not be certified. Is there any... I read the response from the state, and I wasn't illuminated. Any reaction to that?
We've very specifically posed that question to HCD regarding whether or not having an affordable housing, inclusionary housing program affects the affordability of units, and their determination is that there really is no substantive evidence to say that having an inclusionary housing program depresses or decreases the affordability of units. So they've not taken a position on that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing on the housing element. Anyone wishing to address the council, please step forward. State your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Harrigan. I live in Corona Del Mar, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Newport Beach Housing Coalition. Now, our chairwoman, who is on vacation and not available tonight, sent a letter to all the members of the City Council. The copy I have is dated July 31st. It was put into snail mail, not email, but I don't see it as part of the public record. Did we miss a step somewhere? Does something that gets sent to the City Council people not get on public record, or did you not receive it? Is it possible to tell me?
It appears we did not receive it in the planning department.
If you just sent it to the council members individually, it just came to our homes.
Well, it was sent to Newport Beach City Hall, so you would have come to your offices. So you all don't have, you're not aware?
It came to our homes through the council mail packets, but it doesn't get placed in the official record of the city.
It doesn't become part of public record?
No.
That way? Okay. We learn something every time.
Excuse me, just to clarify for that, it's best to send a letter to the City Council via the City Clerk, directed towards the City Clerk for getting things in the record and requesting them to be part of the record.
Okay, so then if
I think what happened was it came to us in individual envelopes. That's why it didn't get into the record. Right.
I see. Well, if I may paraphrase, so I don't read every word of this, the Newport Beach Housing Coalition is a group of Newport Beach residents and supporting organizations who advocate for the development of housing affordable to low and very low income residents. Many of us participated in the Housing Element Workshop. We spoke at the Planning Commission and have written letters to Planning Department staff and the Planning Commission. We raised a number of points. We are concerned by the past performance non-compliance finding by HCD and required carryover of prior planning period RENA shortfall, the lack of identified sites appropriately zoned to meet housing needs for very low and low-income households, the lack of strong policies or implementation plans to facilitate development of homes for low-income residents, and the lack of compliance with SB 2 requirements. Now, I understand that in the documents we've just seen that were on the website, city site, some of these issues have been addressed, but this letter went out on July 31st. We were concerned about the past performance of the previous housing element, and we cited the articles of the California Government Code as to which ones applied. We had a problem with the fact that 3,157 homes, the vast majority were only affordable for upper income households, and really the only one that we could tell was the 119 homes in the age-restricted Bayview Landing that were actually for affordable, guided to affordable. The number has been addressed earlier. I read the explanation that was in the answer to the Kennedy Commission's mention of this issue, and frankly, I didn't understand it. If the housing was counted by the county and Irvine before we took it over, does that affordable house for Irvine or the county, or do we get it? It was very confusing. And the current draft, we feel, should implement a strategy to address the 145 more homes for the past very low and moderate income unmet need. The explanation in what's on the website said that they were still talking to HCD about that, which seems odd. I mean, how can you skip that? We were concerned about the lack of identified sites appropriately zoned for very low and low-income homes. We will have insufficiently appropriate zone sites to meet the housing needs for extremely low, very low, and low income. While the draft identifies some underutilized land and proposed mixed-use zoning sites, most of them are not zoned at appropriate densities and do not have development standards that would facilitate affordable homes for lower-income people. The lack of strong policies or implementation plans to facilitate the development of homes. Zoning is not updated to facilitate density sufficient for lower-income RENA requirements. AHIP planning has failed to provide the target percentage of affordability, and this one really bothers me personally. A program remains a policy and not an ordinance. There's reference to an ordinance that's going to be passed in the summer of '08. Well, we're 2 weeks from Labor Day, and I don't think anything's happened yet. No target date for the implementation of the new in lieu fee program that's being updated has been established.
Ma'am, your time's expired.
5 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought I read faster than that. Well, I'm sorry about that. I may give this to the clerk, and you all read it already anyway, I hope, and I hope it becomes part of a public record in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joseph Boyle, and I live in Corona Del Mar. And actually, the easiest part of this whole housing element process has taken place. Consultants and the staff have developed it. You've had hearings. The Planning Commission has had hearings. You're now having a hearing. You're going to send it to HCD. They're going to give you some advice, and it probably will be approved. But the real challenge is not meeting, I don't think, the state requirement, although the city has had trouble in the past dealing with this. The real challenge is political will on the part of the city to actually construct new units for the lower. You see, the moderate, we take care of very well, as you pointed out, wonderfully. The statistics are great there in terms of the RENA numbers. But as far as the lower income level, that's where the city has a problem, and where the city has to develop a will and become creative in terms of developing these units. In the past cycle, we've done pretty well in terms of housing for seniors. And of course, they are the more acceptable ones, I suppose, to deal with politically and being accepted. The real need has been, over the years, for family units for the lower groups, and to meet those RENA needs in terms of what the state requires. And so really that's the challenge, I think. The easiest part, I think, we've seen. We can do that. Now, if we sit back and rest on the laurels of just having the housing element approved, and also by HCD, and say, well, the state law has been accomplished and we're clear, that certainly doesn't do the trick. It's new construction on the ground and availability of housing. And this I encourage you to do, is to make that commitment, not just on pieces of paper, but a real commitment to become creative and to take care of these needs that we have in the city for the lower family units. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Jean Forbath, and I am not a resident of the city of Newport Beach. I live in Costa Mesa, but I'm very familiar with Newport Beach and the residents of Newport Beach because for 38 years I've been affiliated with an organization called Share Ourselves, which is just up the street from you. And all during those 38 years, we have become acquainted with a lot of people from Newport Beach who have been homeless, which is seems to be an anomaly for a city like yours. The definition of homeless is somebody who doesn't have a home, who doesn't have a place, who doesn't have a geographical area to say this is where I am or this is where I'm from. So it's easy to say that the homeless are transient. That's what we put up with Costa Mesa for years, that all our homeless are transients, But I really question the numbers that you have in the original. I haven't seen the update, so I don't know whether you've raised your number of homeless from what you had in March when we went to the public hearing. When we went to the study session, I'm sorry. But it's been my experience that Newport has been supportive of other organizations to take care of the homeless. You have listed in your paper a whole bunch of long list of organizations who do provide for the homeless. And I'm sure that if you were asked to give some financial support, maybe you would do that. But SB 2 says that you need to just have a zoning by right for a shelter to be built. I would hope that Newport would not only just have a zoning by right, but that you would take a really an active and a supportive role in trying to encourage a nonprofit to come to your city and build a shelter to take care of the homeless, which really do exist in your city. The homeless population is quite invisible. They know where to hide. They know how not to be. Some people are too visible, and they're the ones that people look at with a great disdain. But the homeless are really the families that you don't see who are living in their cars, families who are in the motels down on the 101. There's a motel that I won't list the name of, but we sent families there for years who are homeless in your city. So I would just hope that you would live the spirit of the request and not just the law, and not just zone by right a place where a shelter can be built, but that you would actively try to provide some shelter building for your homeless population. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Zeke Gutierrez. I'm an attorney with the Public Law Center. I'd like to just make a few points. We submitted some correspondence as well. To begin with, as your consultant mentioned, the housing element has a much shorter time period in terms of the time that it considers needs and the time that it engages in planning. That's different than the 6 other elements. And so when you're thinking about, gee, what are we going to do 10, 15 years from now, that could involve 3, possibly 2 or 3 housing element planning periods. And I would submit that we just have to wait to see what the conditions are there as contemplated by the housing element process, so that it's actually treated in the living fashion that it's intended to be used with this shorter time period. I'd also like to point out that with regard to the research that's been conducted, the needs assessment, SB 2 states that planning for special needs housing has to be part of a jurisdiction's planning process. So it's not quite enough to say, well, gee, there's just not that much data available on a local basis or any other basis. I submit on that a jurisdiction might have to very well conduct original research to make it part of its planning process. That's what planning is. And in this day of computers and GIS information, the duty is even greater and the expectation is greater for a jurisdiction to do original research if that's what's required. Just doing a quick count of what you had here, I saw where there's upwards of 300 persons who have special needs, require special needs housing. Again, and that's not all just homeless folks. So to say that, well, we contacted the police department and they did a head count of 50 or so, as some jurisdictions are doing, that misses a point. The homeless needs are just one aspect. There's also emergency shelters. transitional shelters, and those aren't necessarily homeless folks. They might have temporary housing needs that have to be met by jurisdiction. I'm also a little concerned. I haven't heard it here quite, but I do have to express my concern because I've heard it with a number of Orange County jurisdictions, is that the homeless issue should be dealt with on a regional basis. Conditions with regard to special needs housing, again, it's not just homeless, vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. What's required and what's needed here in Newport Beach could be very different than what's needed in Garden Grove. So even though the condition might be regional, county, even national, the solutions have to be addressed on a local basis to address those local conditions and those environmental conditions. Just generally with regard to senior housing, that's very important. We're all headed there in one way or another. But I would submit on that it's kind of begs a question with regard to meeting the RHNA, the spirit and also the objectives of RHNA, which is to provide a regional fair share of housing. Senior housing could be no more, and I'm not trying to be unfair here, but could be no more than addressing the needs of a jurisdiction's aging population, which doesn't really go toward the regional housing need. Whether inclusionary housing helps or hurts efforts for affordable housing, I think is a matter of planning. Planning is an art, it's not a science, and I think you just have to kind of roll up the sleeves and see exactly what needs to be done so that it's a plus and not a minus. I don't think it just could be dismissed outright as has been submitted to you. With regard to folks that might have substance abuse or other types of problems like that, SB2, again, speaks about residential services. In other words, the integration of a response to those needs with the housing. So even though you may have been providing funding through block grants to different organizations that serve these groups, I think what SB2 is getting at, and it, anyone reading it can see that there's a new approach that's called for by SB2, and what SB2 is getting at is an integration of provision of those services with the appropriate housing for those folks, be it on just a temporary transitional basis or maybe a little longer term, but it's the integration of those things I think that SB2 is requiring. Beg to differ with council. I think if a letter is submitted to public officials and not to the city clerk, it still represents a submission to the record and becomes part of the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Selich, council members. I'm Beverly Schuberth. I'm a resident of Harborview Hills. I'm also staff at the Kennedy Commission. The Kennedy Commission appreciates staff's review and their comments and reassessment of some of their numbers after our letter that we submitted in June. We continue to have concerns that the draft housing element will not meet the state requirements regarding identification of realistic and viable sites and appropriate policies and programs to meet the housing needs of our very low and low-income residents and commuting employees who would like to become residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the hearing. Bring it back to council. Discussion, motion. Mayor Pro Tem Daigle.
Sure, I'd make a motion to approve the element as recommended by our staff.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, call for the vote.
With Councilmember Rosansky absent, the motion carries.
Okay, next item on our agenda is public comments. Madam Clerk.
Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is John Tausig. I'm a Corona Del Mar homeowner resident. I'm here to cover a subject that doesn't quite rank with the economy, Iraq, or John Edwards, but it's very important to myself and to a number of Corona Del Mar and Newport Beach residents, and it has to do with Time Warner Cable. I'd like to start just by asking how many of you have read the Daily Pilot editorial, July 13th, on the subject of Time Warner. Time Warner should be handled now. I brought copies I'll hand out so that you can read. The cities of Los Angeles and Costa Mesa are entertaining possibilities of litigation against Time Warner Cable for the quality of the service that they're providing as part of the cable service that they offer, the internet service. I'm here today to request that a hearing be placed on the docket to review Time Warner Cable so that you can hear the magnitude of complaints that we who have their service are experiencing with them, and also to invite a senior member of Time Warner Cable to come, not to make a presentation, but to at least listen to the magnitude of the problems. They have shown a corporate arrogance toward dealing with problems. You can't reach them on the phone. They have a corporate logo, the power of you. It really is the power of who, as far as I'm concerned, because they don't, in the 2 years that they have provided the service in Newport Beach, they took over, as you know, having bought the Adelphia and Comcast business base 2 years ago. They've never once done a survey. They have nothing on their website soliciting comments. Nothing has ever come in the mail or in a bill stuffer. It's like they don't care about the customer base. So we're kind of trapped. I mean, I could walk 4 blocks, sell my house, and buy a house across the other side of Coast Highway, and I could be in the Cox Cable Empire franchise. And from what I'm hearing, people who have Cox Cable are very happy with the service, the responsiveness when they are having issues with Cox. Time Warner, I have no leverage as an individual, nor do my neighbors, but you do, since you administer the contract with them. And it's been 2 years now, and enough is enough. So I'm requesting that a hearing be held so that we have an opportunity to share with you, with specifics, exactly how poor a service provider they are.
Thank you.
Just a question. We exchanged emails.
Yes, we did. That's right. And I'm glad you're happy with AOL.
Yeah, I've said, unfortunately, as far as your argument that I had good experience getting in touch with them, but you have had contact with neighbors, so there's not just, this isn't a single complaint. You feel that if we had a hearing, there would be a number
I
of
would
people
tell
that have
you,
more
if this is on the docket, you would have to have a bigger room than this for the hearing. I would say in the hundreds. Yes. I've been asked to come here tonight to represent them, to get this formally placed on the docket. We just don't know what to do. They are not responsive. I wrote a letter to the president of Time Warner Cable. Their regional office is here in Anaheim, and the president of LA South got the letter, turned it over to one of his underlings. I met with one of the underlings, and I get a lot of, yeah, that sounds good, that sounds right, you're absolutely right, but nothing gets done. And that's what this article talks about, which I've now distributed to all of you. Their arrogance just can't be believed. And we're captive. I mean, there's nothing else I can do. You sort of get hooked on cable once you've had it, and it's not like I could pick up a phone and call Cox and get Cox in. It's just impossible at this point. So,
okay. Thank you, sir. Any other public comments?
Good evening. I'm Mary Bryant. Excuse me, I'm having a little trouble with my voice. I think I'm getting a cold or something. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for West Newport Beach Association, and they have asked me to come and read a letter to you that was sent to you via email on August 8th, and in order to have it in the record, but as I understand now that it has to go to the city clerk, so maybe I could pass it over. There we go. And This is what the body of the letter says. Dear Mayor and honorable members of the City Council, the Board of Directors of the West Newport Beach Association has discussed and reviewed the proposed Sober Living by the Sea settlement terms. On July 30th, the WNBA held a forum with speakers Dave Kiff, who is the Assistant City Manager, and Bob Rush to discuss the SLBTS settlement terms. This forum drew a large audience. There were many questions posed by the speakers and the audience. On August 4th, the WNBA met and unanimously voted to oppose the present settlement terms. This is an emotional issue for many, but the two main reasons for our present opposition are as follows. Number one, is it funny? Excuse me, Mayor, I didn't know, was it?
Go ahead, continue, ma'am.
Oh, okay, okay. Number one, dispersion. We believe there needs to be a greater dispersion of some of the proposed 156 recovery beds in West Newport Beach, equitably into other areas of the city. There is an overconcentration of these beds in the West Newport, Lido, Peninsula, Newport Shores area. Number two, the six-pack facilities. The WNBA is concerned about the potential increase of state-licensed six-pack facilities in the West Newport, Lido Peninsula, Newport Shores areas. And we believe the city should take a more aggressive stance on controlling the six-pack facilities to the maximum extent under the law, which would be the Group Residential Uses Ordinance 2008-05. As president, I believe that the West Newport Beach Association will be prepared to be more favorably consider the settlement terms if the two main reasons for our opposition are addressed and favorably resolved by the council. Thank you for your efforts with respect to the group homes issue. Respectfully submitted, West Newport Beach Association by Paul Watkins, President. I'm reading for him because he couldn't be here tonight. In closing, I would just like to say, as city council members, if you don't live in an area that has an overabundance of recovery beds, it could possibly be very difficult to understand this very serious condition concerning our city. And I'm just hoping that you will consider this letter in making your decision in the upcoming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, close that portion of our agenda. Next item is Planning Commission agenda and oral status report. Mr. Lipo.
Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning Commission last Thursday had two public hearings. The first involved North Newport Center and the traffic phasing ordinance, and this was the next step that followed the Council's previous action to approve the transfer of development rights from Block 600 to Block 500. The Planning Commission action found that the traffic study and the development that was proposed with that transfer of development rights was consistent with the traffic phasing ordinance, adopted a resolution saying so. Second, there was a proposal for a parcel map and zone change at 627 West Bay, it's corner of 7 and West Bay Avenue. The recommendation from the planning staff was denial because the reorientation of the lots from frontages on 7th to frontages on Bay Street was not consistent with two of the new general plan policies related to requiring access from the alleys for both units and limiting the number of curb cuts on the street. This proposal, if approved, would have not allowed both units to take access from the alley and would have eliminated a parking space on the street. Therefore, the recommendation or the action was to deny the parcel map. No further action required. That was it.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you. Next item is continued business. Agenda item 14, council review and approval of city staff benchmarks and performance measures. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to give just a little background for those people who might be watching. Both in 2007 and 2008, the City Council adopted a priority to institute an organizational improvement effort through data gathering and the identification of service benchmarks to measure organizational effectiveness. As you remember, in January, you heard the results of the customer satisfaction survey, which were quite good. Tonight, you are going to be listening to 3 presentations from staff members talking about benchmarks that have been developed among the 30 benchmarks that are for your review and approval tonight. Those aren't only benchmarks but performance measures, so that they can help us measure ourselves against similar type of cities. And the list of similar type cities will be coming to you within the next 6 weeks. And then the third phase was based upon those comparisons to pick out several internal processes that look like they may provide a good opportunity for improvement in improving the processes. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Craig Rapp and Brooke Myrie from ICMA, who have been leading us through this process. I do see that we have both Susan Warren from the library and George Murdoch from utilities, who have been really key players among Mike Wojciechowski and John Kapler, who were the 4 staff members who have been the people working with both Craig and Brooke through this process and serving as filters back to them and also filters back to the general staff. And later we're going to hear, like I say, 3 presentations, and I will introduce those staff members as they come up. Craig?
Thank you, Homer. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm very pleased to be back. I'm Craig Rapp with ICMA. I'll make this brief because I'd like to give you the opportunity to hear from the staff, but the couple of things I'd like to say in as long as I'm here tonight is that we've reached a major milestone in this project, as the city manager pointed out. We've got in front of you 30 service areas that have measures attached to them. That was something that I think is a credit to the hard work that not only the Finance Committee has done, but all of the employees who were involved in many, many meetings over the past number of months putting this together. When you approved this project, you were making a commitment, in my judgment, to data-driven decision-making. And as we've pointed out in the past when we've been here, performance measurement is a tool. It's only a tool. The ultimate goal is results. It's to get high-quality service delivery results. But you can't get there unless you can measure it, unless you can determine how those results were put together. Ultimately, you'll be benchmarking that against other jurisdictions, against other standards that are out and available to benchmark. But this is the first step to getting there. So one of the things that is important to understand about this is how the departments will use them, whether it's easy to use, how they will be comparing that, how they will look at their operations differently, perhaps, once that data comes in. And I think it's important for you to hear from the people who will actually have to use this day in and day out. At some point, I'll be gone, and it'll be up to the management of the city, to you as the board, and to the people who have to deal with this data every day to operate that. And if you're going to be successful at continuous improvement efforts, it'll have to be easy to use, and it'll have to be easy to administer. So with that, we'd just as soon turn it over to the staff to make those presentations.
First staff person to give a presentation is going to be Public Works Administrative Manager Jamie Pollard, who's going to be reviewing the Capital Improvement Plan Delivery Benchmark. Jamie?
Thank you, Homer. Mayor Selich and members of the council, my name is Jamie Pollard, and I'm representing the Public Works Department. In the Public Works Department, one of the things that we've adopted as a department logo or motto is that we're a well-engineered machine. And when we started this project, one of the things that made it simple for us to follow what Craig and Brooke had introduced to us was the issue of alignment. On one of the first steps that we took when we looked at the CIP delivery program was how does it align with the city's goals and visions and things that they've already have established in different documents such as the general plan. Also, we looked at how are we looking towards our operational departments, what's our purpose in delivering the CIP. This time last year, our CIP was somewhere around $40 million. The newly adopted budget for fiscal year 08-09, our CIP is nearly $71 million. Our complexity and our need for efficiency has really been important for council as well as for staff. So in addressing this project, we looked at our vehicle as being kind of a race car. And if it was out of alignment in any way, if it wasn't in alignment with the purpose of the city and its goals, it wouldn't complete the race. When we were looking at the benchmarking project and the forms that you have before you, the 4 measures that we're asked to evaluate and present on are items such as quality, cost, timeliness, and customer satisfaction. And those are like the tires on a race car. If one of them's underinflated, it's not going to go very far. If one's overinflated, it's not going to do the job either. And they need to be perfectly balanced and in alignment to get us where we want to go. For the CIP delivery program, the 4 measures that we are looking at to sustain the purpose of the delivery program, which is to protect and provide public infrastructure and assets so that the programs and services can be delivered to the people of Newport Beach. Those 4 measures include quality, and we have identified a pavement management index, a condition index with a minimum standard of 60 and a rating of 60, somewhere on the border of fair to good, to an average rating of 80, which is somewhere around very good to excellent. So on average, we want to be pretty darn good, with a minimum of being mostly good in the areas that may need additional attention. With a slurry seal program, it's also a quality measure where if we cap our pavement and we protect that pavement for wear and tear on future deterioration, that we do that at a minimum of every 8 years. And some cities will do it up to 10 or 15 years on a cycle. So some of it depends on the condition of our environment and the wear and tear of the environment onto our pavement. For cost, we want to deliver 90% of our CIP projects on budget up to a 7% contingency. The current council policy is to allow us to have a 10% contingency on most of our projects. So on those that we have a 10% contingency, we want to deliver 95% of the projects on the budgeted cost, including that 10% contingency. For a time cycle, we're going to be looking at our CIP projects by category. Our projects are organized by different families of projects. Buildings are in one category, streets and drainage are in another, and there are 8 categories. 85% of our CIP projects by category will be completed within the scheduled time that we state in advance, with a plus or minus 2-month window for variables. As far as customer satisfaction, we want to deliver on satisfaction. The satisfaction surveys that were done last year said that pavement is really important, traffic flow is very important, the delivery of recreation programming is very important, and so we're hoping that these surveys are continued, and we're also going to be looking at the customers that are directly impacted by our improvements and asking for their input. Was it what was expected? Was it delivered? Was the construction itself a satisfactory process? And then finally, on the criteria for our benchmarking project, the ICMA folks have told us over and over that it needs to be meaningful, useful, and sustainable. And we do think that it's very meaningful because it's important to the people of Newport Beach as well. The overall CIP budget, again, is very large and represents nearly 30% of the overall total budget for the city. So it's a lot of appropriation of resources that need to be managed very well. As far as sustainable, we are very, very close to introducing our tracking system to you, and the new budget is due to come out at the end of this month, and we hope to give you an invitation to test drive our application process, and it's been a really fun process to pull together the right data to be reviewed at the right time. And we hope to hear your comments on that process as well.
Okay, any questions? Councilman Webb?
Just one comment under quality. I think all of the various different goals are great, and I just want to remind the council that these are wonderful goals, and I hope that we can afford to provide the money to meet those goals.
Thank you, Councilman Webb. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Our next presenter is Tara Finnegan, who is our Public Information Manager. She's going to review the benchmark on public information and communications, which was an important issue with our customer satisfaction survey.
Good evening, Mayor Selich and members of the City Council. I'm Tara Finnegan, as Homer said, the Public Information Manager. And as you are well aware, this year the city has really focused its efforts on improving our public communication. As we were developing the Public Information Service Indicator and performance measures, we took 4 things into account. First, as Jamie already mentioned, the customer satisfaction survey results. Second, the 2008 City Council priority to improve public communication. The third was the city's new strategic communication plan that also has its own measurable goals, strategies, and objectives. And the fourth, of course, is the annual resource allocation plan that we report each year on some communication output, such as newsletters produced, TV shows produced, et cetera. So taking all of these things into consideration, we knew that our benchmarking had to be aligned with and augment our existing efforts. So I worked with our ICMA consultants to identify comparable cities that are currently benchmarking communication. And this proved to be much more challenging than we expected it to be. There are many cities, of course, that measure their communication programs, but there are very few cities that benchmark their communication efforts that are comparable to Newport Beach in terms of our size and attributes, and also our communication plan and budget. Some of the cities we looked at included Austin, Texas, Carlsbad, Irvine, San Jose, Phoenix, and Ventura. With all of these internal and external factors in mind, we developed a list of performance measures before you this evening. And of course, our overall purpose for all of this is to ensure that our residents, businesses, and visitors, and our staff feel very well informed about what we're doing here at City Hall. Our 4 areas, as Jamie already mentioned, the first one is quality measures. Are we engaging our customers and meeting their expectations? So we chose 2 areas here. First, the percentage of customers that are satisfied or were able to find the information that they were looking for on our city website. And second, the number of customers that are signed up for our eSelect service. Cost measures. As we're trying to produce quality programs and projects, are we being fiscally responsible? So we want to look at the cost per 30-minute NBTV program produced and the cost per capita for our city communication program. And cycle time. It's very important for us to be timely in our communication efforts. So how frequently are we going to be posting and editing our city website? And how many NBTV programs are we producing each year? And finally, of course, back to customer satisfaction. How effective is our program? What is the quality of our website and our cable programming? And of course, how effective are we overall in our communication efforts with the public? By measuring these areas with the tools as proposed with a biennial customer satisfaction survey, web-based surveys, which we're looking at some new software vendors, as you know, for our website that have these tools in place, and even some focus groups when we can further evaluate the effectiveness of our communication tools and programs. We want to utilize the existing resources we have in place, but we also want to make sure we're putting our resources and our energy into the best places possible to serve the community. And this will, of course, further enhance our accountability to you and the public, demonstrate our progress in these areas, and make sure we're doing exactly what we set out to do. That's the conclusion of my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Tara.
Well, thanks.
Thank you, Tara. Last is going to be Steve Bunning, Fire Marshal, and he's going to be presenting on the fire prevention complaints benchmark.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Steve Bunting, Fire Marshal. The benchmarking project that I'm going to present to you is the one we chose for complaint resolution. And fire department complaints are very important to us. We get a couple a week, average about 2 a week. It's a way we learn about fire hazards other than by our routine means. By routine means, I'm talking about we do 7,000 business inspections with our firefighters. Some of them are done on an annual basis. Some of them are done every 3 years. So there's an intervening period there where we need to learn about what's going on in the building. And complaints are how we learn about those. A lot of the complaints, I shouldn't say a lot, some of the complaints are neighbor versus neighbor, and I think we've all had those phone calls, but a lot of them are very legitimate complaints, and we have an opportunity to reduce hazards by these complaints. I'll give you an idea. I looked through the list for the complaints we received in the last year, And I'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. The number one complaint we get is dead and dying trees and vegetation. Trees growing into power lines, dead vegetation piling up in a yard, trees too close to chimneys, abandoned and overgrown. On March 12th of this year, we had a complaint of a dead Christmas tree in somebody's house. March 12th.
Sounds like either a husband or a wife complaining about this.
I'm certain whoever saw the dead Christmas tree in there had seen it somewhere around February as well. But we get a lot of complaints for blocked and locked exits. I think a lot of times there are other firefighters in our city at restaurants and so forth, and they know the rules. And come Monday morning, we'll get the phone call for a blocked or locked exit or blocked stairway or something like that. We see those. Illegal construction, we usually investigate those before we refer them to the building department because a lot of times it's something we can solve with the fire code. It involves exits that have been reconfigured or eliminated, improper electrical work, that kind of thing. Pack rat homes, hazardous material storage inside homes. We actually get those. We've had a few up in the newer parts of Santa Ana Heights. Overcrowding, a lot of overcrowding, and we actually changed our law a few years ago to help us deal with overcrowding. And I think my favorite one that I got this year was from a fire marshal from another state who was a guest at one of our group homes. A client at one of our group homes, and he called to tell me that prior to our inspection that day, they had moved 2 beds out and put them in the garage. So the fire marshal with the drinking problem I get, but I don't know why one of our reputable group homes would be moving beds out before a fire inspector got there. At any rate, we get a lot of complaints. They are important to us. The way we handle it is important. The way we handle them now, it's pretty low tech. We fill out a form. The secretarial staff fills out a form, and the complaint comes in. It goes to an inspector, one of us that's available to take care of it. We've got a place for resolution on there. But I'm really excited about what we've developed on the benchmarking project. We've got some goals we set up for ourselves. We've got our quality measure, for instance. We want to be able to deal with complaints. Immediate life safety issues will be investigated immediately and resolved as indicated by the hazard. We do that on weekends and after hours by using our on-duty battalion chief and our on-duty fire captains. So if they get into a jam, they can call us at home. They can get hold of one of the fire prevention staff at home. But otherwise, that's handled by fire prevention staff during the week. Other complaints will be investigated within 2 business days with a response back to the complaint within 2 days after the initial visit, and more often if required. And 50% of the complaints will be resolved within 10 business days and 90% within 20 business days. That's a little bit of an ambitious goal for us. We think it's a good one, and we're looking forward to working on that.
Okay. Any
Thank
questions? Councilman Curry? No? No questions. Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Mayor, members, as you can hear, you've got some enthusiastic staff, and one of the things that's gratifying to us as consultants is that you have folks here in your organization that embrace this. It's tremendous that you have people who are looking forward to the continuous improvement effort. I think that's a credit to the leadership and to this effort, but I just want to make sure that you appreciate that, because this is tough stuff. This isn't easy, and there aren't a lot of folks out there doing this. There are communities, certainly, that are doing this, but it's not uncommon to have it resisted in an organization. And you have folks, we did drag some people along, and I'm not saying it was totally simple, but the fact of the matter is that by and large, everyone pitched in and worked hard on developing these measures. And I think, I just want to publicly acknowledge that, because you do have folks who are willing to step up and do that. So with that, we're presenting a set of measures in 30 different service areas for your consideration.
Okay. Councilman Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, this exercise builds on our very successful customer satisfaction survey, has sort of step 2 in enhancing the capability of our organization and the services that we provide to the community. And I also, first of all, I'd like to compliment my colleagues on the Finance Committee, Mayor Pro Tem Daigle and Councilmember Hinn, who worked very, very hard in developing these service benchmarks. But I also really would like to echo what Craig said. I really have been very pleased by the staff, by how they have embraced this, by the enthusiastic response, by the good ideas, frankly, that have come from staff as we've gone through this process. I think everybody ought to feel very, very proud about that. One thing that is clear if you look across organizations, and that is that benchmarking is an essential element of becoming a best-in-class organization. And we already have a very, very high quality of service that we provide to the community. But I think this exercise is really helping us move to best of class, where we are going to be looked to as an example by other communities throughout the state and the country. I've said before, Mayor Steve Goldsmith of Indianapolis used to say, or still does say, that cities are moving from being simply service providers to being the generators and creators of public value. And I really think that embodies what we're doing here in Newport Beach in terms of our general plan, in terms of the policies that we're implementing for the community to generate public value on behalf of our citizens. And I think this benchmarking exercise, so that we can answer the question, compared to what? You know, unless you can say we are the best compared to another community, or we are better compared to our performance of last year, then statistics really have no meaning. So I see this as being really a key element of us moving forward, and I'm very, very proud of the effort that our consultants have expended for us, and I'm particularly proud of the response from our employees.
Councilwoman Gardner?
I have a couple of questions. I understand that we might have some outside comparisons in the beginning, but do we continue to make outside comparisons? Because that to me seems a very difficult thing. Once we set our benchmarks, it seems to me there should be almost strictly internal comparisons, because trying to find the real apples to apples, as Tara was saying, that's so difficult. And what may make us seem perhaps not as hitting our mark as we would like, because we're comparing ourselves to some other city, could be totally off the mark just because there are some significant differences. And to take the time to distinguish all those differences may be adding a level of effort that we don't want.
Mr. Mayor, Council Member, there's a couple of things to make sure that you understand the totality of what we're doing. We've got all of these measures. Not every single one of them will be compared against another community. Much of what you see in front of you will be for internal purposes. It'll be, what did we do last year? What did we do this year? What did you do last quarter? There will be a number of them identified by the letter B that will be used to compare outside organizations to yours. When we do that, we'll be very careful to annotate that and to make sure, in fact, the staff will be expending a fair amount of time judging the differences in the communities that are ultimately selected. The next time I'm in front of you will be to give you the benchmarking communities to look at, and you'll be asked to approve those communities. We will also be using some other reference material and best practice that are out there. Many of the disciplines have their own benchmarks. The Waterworks Association, for example, American Waterworks does that, and we'll probably use some of that information. So we will always do an apples to apples, or we will rectify the information so that you're not doing an apples to oranges. I want to make sure.
Then I had a couple of questions on the benchmarks. I'll just mention them really quickly. On page 5, which is the city attorney, the quality, that the percentage of time final documents accurately reflect the approved city action. I mean, that just seems to me, hey, if it's not 100%, then the city attorney should be looking for a new job. So I have a problem with that one, okay? I don't know if anybody else does. And then also back on page, sorry, I've got my marks, but my fingers aren't working. 31, we get to water quality. The annual number of days the beaches are swimmable. No, that's not something to benchmark, at least not in that way, because if we have a rainy year, we have all sorts of things could impact us that has nothing to do with what our staff is doing. So, I mean, to maintain compliance with the city's NPDES permit, that's within our control. But those first two, not necessarily at all. So I think that would be something to really consider whether we want to try to benchmark those.
Well, and we may be benchmarking against ourselves also and say, okay, well, it was a rainy year, so there are cut us some slack maybe on a rainy year, but are there more sewer line backups?
Right, well, we might want to
busted lines?
be a little more specific then in terms of what we are really going to look at, the things that are within our control. And also, we have to understand that obviously, since we're at the end of the line, so much of what impacts our beaches is not just rain, but what other cities are doing.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Mayor Pro Tem Daigle?
A couple, as we discussed earlier today, there was some measure with the police department and the patrol wants to be counted as doing investigations as well. Fair enough. And I think the suggestion was that those investigations would be counted separately than investigations that are being undertaken by the detectives.
Right.
And then the second one that was discussed had to do with the plan check measure, and the what was discussed was that we use a median instead of an average. Those two ones. And then I have a question for the city manager. Managing the day-to-day service delivery. What is your understanding of the ICMA contract on benchmarking, and what is your vision as far as where the benchmarking is going?
Well, I haven't looked at the contract recently, but we aren't through with the benchmark phase yet because, like Craig said, coming up with the comparable cities, and then I think their contract would still allow them to continue working with that and making sure that the data that staff has gathered and the understanding that we have data gathered from other cities that we may be comparing ourselves against, that seems to be valid, and wherever there seem to be hiccups or it looks like it doesn't work, helping us work through that so that we can scrub the data and really be comparing ourselves with apples with apples. It was always my understanding that at least for this calendar year, which is your priority year, that we would do the three phases, the customer satisfaction survey, the benchmarks, and performance measures, and then look at some identified processes for improvement. And it seems to me the processes for improvement identification may come after the first of the year. We may not be able to complete that this year. I'm not saying for sure not, but we're getting into data gathering here. We're almost 8 months through the year, so we're looking at 4 more months. I feel very good about the progress that we've made. I know the customer satisfaction survey was started in November, but if you look back in the last 10 months, we've really made a lot of progress, a lot of headway. Now we feel like we have comfortable benchmarks that we can work with, but we need to test them to see. So I think then the third phase, whenever we're looking at maybe some processes, I don't think that's covered in your in your contract, Craig, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
But I think you're still going to be with us for a little while.
Yes, and the only other thing that would be covered, we're going to do a report comparing overall. In fact, Councilmember Henn talked about that at the Finance Committee earlier today, comparing some general statistics across all of the operations of the city with other benchmarking cities that you'll end up approving next month when we come back. So that's the third piece of the. And just to elaborate a little bit on what Homer mentioned, we will be helping your staff with some training and data analysis and the kinds of things that they'll need to make sure that they're maintaining this project over time. And we'll set up the fundamentals so that you've got that in place.
Okay, Councilman Henn?
Just a quick follow-up on Councilmember Gardner's question regarding the need for external comparisons. Really, we've got two kinds of, broadly speaking, two kinds of measurements here. Internal measurements that are time series based, where we can tell, are we doing better this year than we were doing last year? Is our trend in the right direction? And those kinds of measurements help us understand if we're doing better at what we're doing. The external benchmark measurements, though, provide a basis for us to tell, are we doing the right thing? Is there a better way to achieve the outcome we're looking for? And the external comparisons give you the ability to identify areas where you can drill down farther to see if there's a best-in-class solution that we just simply are not implementing, and to stimulate ideas for new and different ways to achieve better outcomes. And so you really need a balance of both on a regular basis.
Okay, any other comments? Councilman Curry?
I would move approval of the benchmarks as presented.
Second.
I would like to offer a counter or an amendment to that, which is to ask the city attorney to refine that one particular goal, which seems to be absurd, and to also refine the water quality benchmarks.
I would incorporate those in my motion.
And add the police in the other one?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone from the public wish to address the council on this item? Okay, seeing no one, bring it back. Council, please vote.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item is item number 15. It's a request from Pelican Coast Events LLC for waiver of council policy B8.
And Acting Recreation and Senior Services Department Director Sean Levin is going to present this staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm here before you tonight to, my name is Sean Levin, as Homer said, to address a letter that was sent to the City Council requesting a one-time waiver from Pelican Coast Events of Council Policy B8 to hold the Pacific Coast Triathlon in July of 2009. Council Policy B8 prohibits bike, foot race, and surf contests during the summer months, and the policy was put in place to minimize impact on residents and motorists and also to limit the city's liability. Pacific Coast Triathlon has held 11 triathlons within the city of Newport Beach successful. I will say they have been very successful. And through July 2004, they were held in July. Through 2004, they were held in the month of July. And at that point in 2004, they were no longer granted a date in July, and it was moved to September. The swim and the run occur in Crystal Cove State Park, and the bicycle race utilizes the southbound lanes of Pacific Coast Highway from Pelican Point to the City of Laguna limits. The southbound traffic is diverted into one of the northbound lanes, and staff is concerned about the traffic impacts in July being greater than they would be in September and creating traffic congestion. Since 2004, the Newport Coast and Crystal Cove State Park area has grown tremendously, and that's kind of where the concern comes from. In 2006, the Crystal Cove Cottages opened. Currently, there are 13 cottages that are available for rental. They're at build-out in 2010, they're going to have 30 cottages, so they weren't quite sure how many they're going to have in 2009, but they'll have some more. And another area of concern is the Marriott Newport Coast Villas. In 2004, there were 21 buildings open with 317 units, and in summer of 2009, they'll be built out to 41 buildings with 700 units. And Crystal Cove Promenade in 2004 as well, that had just opened. It was about 20% capacity, and today Crystal Cove Promenade is at 100% capacity for the businesses. Other areas, PD staffing in July, it's something our police department can certainly do, but their resources are stretched thin in July, and it's just it would be another burden on them to ramp up with July 4th to get people out there to work the event, but it's something that they could do. Another issue is precedence of waiving B8. We get lots of requests of our department every year to have events during the summer, and B8 is a way that we don't do those. So we feel that maybe doing this, more requests will be coming forward to have events to waive B8. So that's kind of our stance on this issue. And if you have any questions, I can answer them at this time. And also Sergeant Fischbacher is here from the police department as well for any police-related issues.
Okay. Any questions for Sean? Councilman Webb?
So just to make it clear, your recommendation and the police department's recommendation is that we do not approve this request?
That is correct.
Okay.
Councilman Rosansky?
Yeah, Sean, well, actually, before I ask any questions, I just would like to state for the record that I am a Boy Scout Assistant Scoutmaster with Boy Scout Troop 90. Troop 90 has received donations in response to providing volunteers for this event. I've asked the city attorney if I have a conflict. She says I don't, but I'd like to make sure it's on the record that I do have that connection to this. And with that background, I have been at probably at least the last 5 or 6 of these events that have been held both, I guess, in July and now later. By closing the southbound lanes during the, I guess, 6 to 12 o'clock, is that what we're looking at? Are any Newport Beach resident communities going to be effectively blocked from access in or out?
Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the major impacts are going to be for the cottages and also
13
for
cottages?
Probably about 20 by that time, and also the Newport Coast Marriott villas. Is that accurate?
Well,
Yes.
the villas are on the north side of the highway, though, aren't they? I mean, they'll be able to get in and out of the villas, right? It's for people who, Tom, why don't you come forward so we're not shouting back and forth? Thanks.
Good evening, Tom Fishbacher with the Police Department. Access to the villas is not restricted. It's access from the villa residents to the state park that will be challenging.
And how do they normally get to the state park?
They walk straight across from Newport Coast, across the highway, down into the state park entrance, which is restricted for a period of time during the race.
You won't allow pedestrians to cross that area?
No, sir.
Sean, I thought Chief Lewis was maybe going to stay here for this issue. I guess he was here for the benchmarking, but I think you told me that maybe he had some concerns, too, that we probably should relate.
His concern is response time. You know, it's just difficult for them to get through, and he's always has a concern with these sorts of events, and especially that time of year, just with the increase of traffic, he has a concern about safety getting through.
And certainly that area is where we have most concern about our response times now, so slowing us down could have an important impact.
Well, as far as the 13 or 20 cottages or whatever, even the Newport Marriott villas, it seems like we're going to have the same issue in September or whenever they're going to hold the event. There'll be some disruption. You know, granted, there may be a few more people there in the summer staying at the villas, although I don't know. I'm sure they sell out their timeshares year-round. I imagine their occupancy is probably pretty good year-round there. And even in the winter, or September, there's plenty of people showing up. So I really don't see the difference in the disruption. I think it's basically a one-time ask here, and they're asking because they want to make this into some kind of a national qualifying event, which I think is kind of a prestigious thing for the city. So. And how many officers are we talking about?
We're talking approximately 8 officers with a supervisor and a parking control officer.
Okay, so we're not, I mean, I understand we have a significant commitment of officers on the 4th of July, and virtually, well, everybody's working that day, but, I mean, we're talking about 2 or 3 weeks later, and really only 6 or 8 additional officers. It doesn't seem like it's that much of a burden on a 150-officer department. So, or more. I don't even know how many officers we have, quite honestly.
Mr. Mayor, also, as I understand it, on the current date, that it's also the Coastline Car Classic that weekend, which is a busy weekend anyway, so we kind of make it work as it is now. And maybe even July, when you consider that event, that maybe it's better as far as what's happening in the local area, that they aren't on the same weekend.
That's your guys' call. I mean, our concerns basically were, you know, the precedence is a big one for us because we do get so many requests, and that is one. But, you know, I mean, we could certainly.
I do have a question about the request. The request is a one-time this year or this next year only?
Yes, correct.
Event. And it's only in the context of the qualifying issue with regards to Olympic qualifying?
It's not an Olympic qualifier. I mean, Bob can answer that question better than I can.
It's World Championships.
I think it's
We
for
had
the
in
World
Australia.
Championship,
yeah.
okay. So I guess the point is that it may not necessarily be considered precedent-setting for other applications unless they would qualify within that type of a request. In other words, their request for their event is because it's a one-time event. It's the only time that they would ask to do it in the summer, and it would be for a world-class qualifying event, to qualify for that. So I'm not so sure that it would necessarily set a precedence if it was narrowly approved under certain conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my position, or my feeling is on this, is they have been doing this for 11 years. I think they're probably one of the best operators of this type of event.
We don't question that at
Yeah,
all.
considering the numbers, it's not like we're looking at some new guy coming into town saying, hey, I want to throw an event and I want to do it in the middle of the summer, and we have to, kind of worry is what is he going to do or what not do. And I think that they have proven themselves as good operators and that it is a prestigious event for our city, and obviously it'll be a nationally prestigious event. And for my money, I'd be willing to cut them a little slack, and because it doesn't seem like the impacts are going to. There'll probably be a little bit more impact. I would agree, but not so significantly more that it would just be unworkable. So I guess I would be in favor of allowing the request.
I wonder if we could also, that part of the approval, if we approved it, would be that the promoter is responsible for an outreach program to the villas and the resort areas, informing them of when if they want to get to the beach, they can have to either get up early and go to the beach at this hour, or they can go to the beach at that hour. And that would help with the guests and that sort of thing. And then we can obviously do it as far as the city is concerned.
Also, I might recommend that there's a responsibility for notification in the days prior to the fact along Coast Highway that there will be on those hours, because being a Laguna resident, people within that area are going to be driving back and forth, and to have some advance notice to plan, that'll help alleviate issues with Coast Highway.
I think we do that anyway, don't we? Do we do it with just plain signs, or do you do it with flashers?
I think you do it with the flashers, but I'm not trying to argue this thing. I just want to make clear in my mind, regardless of whether, it's my understanding we'll either run 2 lanes going north or 2 lanes going south, but that would mean only 1 lane in the other direction. So, do we have very much backup now in September on the single lane? And do you think it would be substantially worse holding it in July?
It depends on the time of the day as well. Obviously, at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the backup isn't as significant, but towards the end of the closure, backup does begin to become a little more significant. What becomes challenging as well is then people that want to turn left into the various communities along the line. If there's only 1 lane of traffic, that holds up. A left turner will hold up the remainder of traffic behind them. So that becomes a little challenging as well.
I had a question.
Councilman
Head? There were 2 weekends that they were wanting to target here. Have we checked? Are we sure there's no other congestion-adding events going on either of those weekends? There's no other thing that's happening that's going to. You're not
have we checked in Laguna Beach? I guess.
Yeah,
that would be
we don't allow big events in the summer, so there wouldn't be any major events.
And are we? This is an unusual, once-in-a-while kind of thing, even for that organization. In other words, this is not going to mature into an every year, we want to do this in July kind of thing.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Kyler, you want to come forward?
Thank you very much for entertaining this waiver. I'd like to start with a humorous story that kind of shows
Bob, why don't you state your name for the record?
Synergism between the city.
Bob, state your name.
Oh, Bob
We all know
Kyler,
who you are, but.
Corona Del Mar. And it was in 1997, and it was after 2 weeks of solid rain. And I was out taking the trash out on a Saturday morning, and my neighbor, Denny O'Neill, was walking around in his bathrobe and just walking around in circles, just kind of clasping and unclasping his hands. And I went over to Denny and said, what's up? I said, well, the rain's coming in my backyard, and it's flooding my brand-new wood floor, and I'm waiting for my fire department to come and rescue me. And so I looked at the landscaping and found this rock that was blocking his drainage, and went over to my house next door and got a shovel, picked it up, and drained his backyard and saved him. Well, like a genie, he offered me 3 wishes. And I said, well, Bill Leach and I and Tina Hoover, who's the president of Kiwanis Club, we're plotting to bring back a triathlon in Orange County and a major fundraiser for the beneficiaries of the Kiwanis Club. And I said, we're going in to speak with Caltrans next week to try to close Coast Highway in the middle of the summer. We could use some city help. And he said, well, by all means. And he gave us a few staff members, and we had 3 members of Caltrans at that time that wanted to sign up for the race, and we got a unanimous decision from them. So as far as synergism, I think I have to give the city and my neighbors and friends an A+ in how well we've all cooperated together to make a internationally known race. Within the next couple of days, Julie Swale is going to perform in the triathlon in Beijing. And she was, well, go back a little bit farther. In 2003, we were the Olympic trials, along with New York City, Seattle, St. Petersburg, Florida, Dallas, Texas, and Newport Beach. We were the trials for the Olympics in Athens. And Julie won a lot of points, but was this first alternate and didn't make that team. But she, who started basically, well, one race in Catalina, and then her second, third, fourth, fifth races were the Pacific Coast race. She is now our Olympian in Athens. She's also a gold medalist in water polo. I'm sorry, silver medalist in water polo. So when I look at Big Corona Beach on a Sunday morning and I see 150 people swimming, or I see, Pacific Coast Highway loaded with cyclists, and, before our first race in '98, that really didn't occur in our community much. And I'm very proud of the volunteerism that we've gotten from the Boy Scouts, the Kiwanis Club. Our first goal was to support the new track at Corona del Mar. Our first year, we donated $10,000 to that track. And by the fourth year, we were the same national championship that we're applying for. It is a one-time event. The state policy, which is very similar to the exclusionary policy, is what kicked us out of the summer. It wasn't the city. I think at that time we were kind of grandfathered in because we'd had it so many years here. And we went to Ruth Coleman and lobbied her and got her to override and gave us the waiver for the state park system. And then we did the same thing with Caltrans, and we need your commitment for the race this year. Yes, we'd like to have it every July, but we know unless it's the Olympics, we probably won't ask for it again. Thank you.
Bob, the money that's generated from this event, where does it go to?
Approximately $20,000 a year since the beginning of the race we have donated to charities, and usually they have to be youth-oriented, such as the Boy Scouts or a need from a sports associated program with one of the schools. And the Alliance for the Cottages we donate to every year. The cottages actually come out and man one of our water stations, and they're very enthusiastic. The manager just happens to be a marathon runner, so we hit it off well. And we give money to the Alliance. They're very supportive. In fact, they have to sign off on our permit. Ruby's and the Beachcomber are head sponsors of our race, and they give us about 30 dinners. They say the business immediately after the race is tremendous, and because all the athletes are very thirsty for those margaritas, I think. And we actually reserve 50 spots in that Los Tranquilos parking lot that we make sure that their staff can get in and out. And it's the same with the cottage. They're advised, and they can always get in and out because they have to park over at Los Tranquilos on the other side, so they use the tunnel. And so far we've been able to basically make an accident-free and a complaint-free race for the last 11 years, which has surprised us quite a bit. But we do think that we now run, Bill and I run 3 races a year, and we deal with Orange County and Caltrans and Mission Viejo and Lake Forest and 2 departments of sheriffs and 2 departments of CHP, and I do get the best service from Newport Beach. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
I see a lot of folks out here that might want to talk.
You know what?
Is anyone on the council inclined to disapprove this?
Actually, I'd take, if I had the opportunity to make a motion, I'd just make one.
Okay.
Well,
no, I'll have some. I have some conditions, so go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll be more than happy to let you do it if you want to.
All right, that we approve that the race be allowed to take place in July, a one-time event, and that the race producers or directors, however they are termed, will take upon themselves responsibility of working with the Irvine Company, the Marriott, the Beachcomber, and the Crystal Cove Alliance to be sure that in plenty of time the guests there will be made aware of the upcoming event and how it might inconvenience them.
And I'll second that. Second motion.
Okay, yeah, I think you can see the direction the council's headed, so does anyone feel compelled to testify on this? Okay, come on forward.
Good evening, council members. My name's Andrew Bailey. I'm a former Newport Beach resident. I've been involved with the Pacific Coast Triathlon since its inception, either as a participant or as a volunteer. And I'm also a United States Triathlon official, and I have been out on that course as a course monitor several times over those years. So I would really like to see this event take place. It's quite an opportunity for us locals to be able to race in a world championship, or I shouldn't say world champion, but a United States championship event. There's not a lot of events that we can do within California. We have to travel a long ways to participate in these races. So it would be a wonderful thing for all of us local triathletes to be involved in. I'm also an owner at a Marriott Resort in Palm Desert, and I know there'll be lots of triathletes putting in their request for their timeshare week that week of this race, and there'll be plenty of people at Newport Coast that will be over there supporting the racers on whatever we can have that race. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Also, Mayor Pro Tem Daigle tells me that, Bob, you might have a problem with one of the conditions. Is that correct? Okay, well, you can work it out with them. Okay, call for the vote.
Motion carries.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Motion for reconsideration. A motion to reconsider the vote of any action taken by the City Council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Okay, is there any motion for reconsideration? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to adjourn our meeting this evening. Can you all please be quiet, please, as you leave? Can you be quiet out there, please? I'd like to adjourn our meeting this evening in the memory of two people who have recently passed away. First one is Christopher Laurie. Christopher died in a car accident on July 24th. He was the son of Pastor Greg and Kathy Laurie of Newport Beach and was involved in his father's Harvest Christian Fellowship as art director, designing signs and bumper stickers for Harvest Crusades. Christopher was only 33 years old. With his wife, Brittany, he had a 2-year-old daughter, Stella, and was expecting a second child. Family was number one to Christopher, and we offer our condolences to his family as they deal with the loss of their son, husband, and father. We would also like to close this meeting this evening in the memory of Jean Olson, who passed away at noon today as of a yet-to-be-determined disease. She, with her husband, Alan, are longtime residents of Corona del Mar. Jean grew up summering on Balboa Island in the 30s and the 40s. Our condolences go out to her husband, Alan, her 2 daughters and son and their families, which include 10 grandchildren. Alan is a good friend of many of us on the City Council, and our deepest sympathies go out to him and his family. With that, we're adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry. We're adjourned to Friday, August the 15th, 2008 at 9 o'clock in the morning.